Three, two, one. Greetings, listeners. This is Lou Carlozo, the host of Bankadelic, and I am so proud to be associated with a new podcast being brought to you by Andrew Schage and the gang at Money Crashers. And with that, I'm going to tell you the title of the podcast, and I'm going to introduce your host to you. And then from there, Eugene, I'm going to ask you to take it. The name of the podcast, drum roll please, is Money She Wrote, and your host, coming up for many, many episodes and many incredible adventures, is Eugene Lee. Eugene, I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background personally and professionally, and then we're going to launch in.
Thank you so much for that intro, Lou. My name is Eugene. I work for Money Crashers. I've been with them for about 7 years now. I started off writing for Money Crashers. I would write about how to spend money and save money and invest money, mostly on topics like surrounding children and travel. Previously, before then, I graduated from NYU in 2007. I worked in the fashion industry. I worked for Reemacra and then Ralph Lauren. And after that, I had my first child. And if you know the fashion industry well, you know that the hours are grueling. And it's a very cutthroat industry. And so when I had my first kid, I had to step back. But I'm a very curious person, and I need to be stimulated intellectually. And so I started taking courses on Coursera, which is like a free college course. It doesn't give you any degrees or certificates, but you could take courses from, I want to say Harvard, from the School of Israel, etc. And I started just taking random courses, but there was no end point to it. So it wasn't enough. And then I somehow got into writing and got in contact with the editor of Money Crashers, and I started writing for them. Fast forward to now, I now have 3 kids, and I've graduated from writing to social media manager, and now starting a podcast for them.
That is fantastic. And since I'm a dad as well, I'm going to ask you the names of your kids and their ages.
Theodore is 7.5. Elliot, yes, she's a girl. She's 4.5. I gave her, Elliot, Elliotte, is actually a French girl's name. People don't know, especially in the US, that it's a unisex name. But I wanted to name my daughter Elliot because I wanted someone to look at her resume and have no idea what gender she was. I feel like growing up as a Korean American and female, I feel like there's a lot of bias. There's you go through racism, you go through gender bias, and so I just wanted her to kind of be ambiguous. And then Esme is 8 months, another French name. Yeah, those are my 3 kids. Does my husband count as a child? Because he would be my first child.
Yeah, introduce your husband very quickly and tell us what he does.
My husband, his name is Gary. He is a certified he's a certified public accountant. He worked for an audit for the Big Four for PricewaterhouseCoopers for about 10 years, and then went on to work for investment banks.
Now, this is by no means superfluous. I think this is important, and this is everything for you to tell us both about your professional background and your personal background, because as I understand it, Money She Wrote is really going to take a unique look at finances. And I'm glad you mentioned Elliot and Esme. C'est si bon. Je suis très heureuse to hear those names. The way that I would put it, being a dad, is I know I have a certain view of finance, a certain view of the world, a certain view of family, but it's by no means equivalent to the female world, where a lot of times there is an underrepresentation of voices, and especially your background as being Korean. And you very frankly talked briefly about some of the obstacles that presents. Tell us what is going to make Money She Wrote a different podcast. I know something about that. I think our listeners would love to know.
I think my approach to this podcast is it's kind of very selfish of me, and in that I, throughout my 36 years of life, that's the only experience I have. That's all I know. And the industries that I have worked in, those are the only industries that I know. I feel like I want my children to have all the knowledge in their hands. And I have limited scope, and my husband has his own limited scope. But then the more that I selfishly want to interview people because I want to learn from them. And if I learn from them, my children will learn from them. It's like I've expanded my life history and experience 1,000-fold by being able to hear the experience and knowledge of what other people went through. And so my legacy for my children would be not only from what I know, but I want to present to them all the podcast episodes. And I want to give it to them and say, hey, here, this is what I can give you. This is more than what money can buy. This is more than what college can teach you. So I want you to take this and expand and grow from that. Basically giving them a step ladder that I didn't have.
Wow. There is so much to unpack there. We could spend a whole nother half hour. A lot of that is just so brilliant and so heartfelt. The one thing I know from doing my own podcast is, yes, there is a drive, a thirst to learn, but in learning that you share what you have gleaned and how it has helped you, there is a selflessness there. And a lot of people who have mentored me in financial services and the world of personal finance have really encouraged me to that end, that absorb all you can, learn all you can for yourself. You might call it selfish. I think it's to come to your defense and be a cheerleader. It's fantastic. If you have that knowledge, you can pass it on. And that is something, as a longtime podcaster, Eugen, I've never thought about. The idea that a series of podcasts can be a gift, a legacy. And financial illiteracy in adults, let alone children, is a real shocking thing. It's alarming. We learn so much in high school and college about a lot of subjects, whether that is English or algebra or biology or chemistry or computer science. But it amazes me that finance, basic finance, isn't taught, and yet it can be one of the most powerful things that someone could ever learn. Money touches everything. Ask any student in college who has to take out student loans and then have that burden for the next 10 or 20 years. So I'm really impressed that you're thinking of this podcast not just as episodes, but as a sharing experience for the audience and a legacy to leave to your children. Now, one thing I'm very curious about, I do not know the answer to this question, are the types of topics that you hope and expect to explore through Money She Wrote.
Obviously finance related, but I think overall the topics that I want to discuss and retrieve from everyone is parenting. I want to learn about hardship and failure. I want to learn about the times that you've been fired from your job and why. I want to learn about what your parents were like and what you loved that your parents did and what you hated and what you want to pass down to your kids. Other topics I want to talk about is just your career, why you chose that career. It could be I could be talking to a chef, and I actually know a few chefs. Like, what what made you go into this industry? It's very difficult. It's very cutthroat. Not a lot of jobs out there, or the ones that people want, like from the Michelin star restaurants. It's a very difficult field to be in. So I want to know what drives them to cook, So yeah.
I believe it was the Protestant theologian Frederick Buechner who said that vocation, which comes from the Latin word vocare, vocal, literally to be called out, is where your deep joy and the world's deep hunger meet. And there's also this notion of passion. And I used to teach journalism at a major university in Chicago. And what I would tell my students is that the root of the word passion is not what people think it is. The stereotypical definition of passion is, oh, I'm passionate, I love this so much. But really, if you go to the root of the word passion, it means to suffer for something you love. Now, I do podcasting. For a long time, I was a journalist, and I would review concerts from the 10th row and got to see anybody I want. And people would say, what an incredible life you have. You're really lucky. And what I would tell them, and what a lot of my colleagues would tell their friends and family, is it is not as easy as it looks. So, small case in point, you go to see this incredible concert. While everyone else is enjoying it, you have to analyze it and look at it almost the way a scientist would and break it down. Then you've got to drive back in a throng of cars, get to the office, and you have 40 minutes to write the review so that it gets in the paper. And if you are at the 38th minute, you get a call from the copy desk saying, Carlozo, where's the copy? It's not easy. And there were a lot of days that I wanted to quit. And I don't know a single journalist who has not gotten frustrated at some point. So really, that passion that you're talking about, why do cooks cook? Why does your husband do accounting? Why are you doing this podcast? That really is the rubber hitting the road. So related to that topic of passion, I would love to know what it is that you're passionate about within the world of finance, within your life at large, because it seems like, if I'm understanding this correctly, that's exactly what you hope to bring to Money, She Wrote.
What am I passionate about? So when it comes to money, I think money is a byproduct of success. I think it's like being fit, right, is a byproduct of a healthy lifestyle. I think that wealth is just that. It's just a byproduct. And it's important, I think, and I'm passionate about maximizing what your money can do for you. The first step is to make money, right? And you should make money by doing something you're good at. And because if you do something that you're good at, you're going to not only do well with it, but you're going to feel so rewarded from your good work. For example, you'll be promoted, you'll get raises, etc. It'll come naturally. So you need to make money first. Second of all, you need to make sure your dollar works for you. I think people don't realize how much money they waste. And I don't mean by spending. If you don't put your money if you don't invest it and you just put it into a bank, the interest rate due to inflation is you're gonna lose money, simply put, but people don't calculate that. And I think it's important to educate yourself and to understand that. I don't like to see things being wasted. So you make money, you have to invest money, and there are different ways of investing. I think I learned too late about investing money. I started investing money once I started working because my company would match my 401k. But if my parents, instead of saving money under the mattress, if they put that into a custodial Roth IRA when I was 10, I would have been a millionaire by age 40. if there, yeah, so it's the power of compound interest. And so I feel like there's so much knowledge out there that people don't realize. And so I want to educate parents, especially, that they could close this generational wealth gap for their children and give them a leg up as an adult. But then they start off, you have to start doing that by when they're kids. Yeah.
That is fabulous.
So that's what I'm passionate about. Don't waste your money.
When can I start listening to your podcast? That's great. I love it.
I mean, yeah, and also, I mean, you don't have to. Most people don't like doing 529 plans, like college savings plans for your kids. But I have 3 kids I have to think about. According to my certified financial planner, that's $1 million by the time they're ready for college. That's a lot, and so I think it's really important that I take basic steps in order to plan for that. And even if I don't want to, or even if other people don't want to do 529 plans, there are other options. And so I really want to educate everyone about all the different paths that they could go.
When Albert Einstein was not studying the theory of relativity or the unified field theory, he actually said this. He said compound interest was one of the most powerful forces in the universe. So it really makes me think how much finance, which, let's face it, some people treat money as dirty. If you make a lot of money, you're greedy. We really have to work at getting rid of those stereotypes because, again, money touches everyone. You're passionate about it. You learned through Coursera and these major universities. I can definitely see a day when your content is up there in the same sort of educational way and people are getting at it. And one of the things, again, that one of my mentors taught me was abundance thinking. You have to be very careful about how you talk about money. So a lot of people say, I'm broke or I'm scraping by. And that has an effect. Earl Nightingale was the first motivational writer. He talked about we become what we think about. And so when I'm in a financial strait that, let's say, is a little dire, what I will say is, well, it's a little rough right now, but I got things that I'm working on, and eventually it's going to be okay. And I do this all the time. And human beings are meaning-seeking creatures, and we need goals. We need things to shoot for. And what better way to do that than through the financial world? And your selflessness in wanting to make sure that your kids are prepared, your own ability to be humble and say, I wish I had done this, because if I had done this in the past, I would be in a much different financial situation. It's all very refreshing. And it seems like that is going to be something that listeners are hungry to learn. Now, just for a second, let's assume one of those listeners comes up to you and says, Eugen, I love what you're talking about. I think it's fantastic. You are inspiring me, but I am so overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. What would you tell them?
Well, first, I would have to know their situation. How old are they? What is their lifestyle like? How much do they spend on their mortgage or their rent? I think housing is one of the most expensive expenses on a monthly basis. So I would want to know that. How much do they bring in? Are they with a partner? Is it a double income household? All those factors. But the first thing you have to do is just figure out where you stand, how much you bring in and how much you're spending. It can be overwhelming, but I would suggest always that you have to watch what you spend your money on. It's okay to live in a smaller house. It's okay to rent. It's okay to move a little farther away if your job is, if you could still commute. What kind of car are you driving? Stuff like that. Just take away anything that you don't need. that you don't, yeah, that you don't, that you can live without, I should say. And start from there and automate your allocation, as in like you have to allocate, let's say 6% into retirement. I think that's a little too little, but if that's all you can do, that's better than nothing. The more you could do now, the more you'll have later. Yeah. So that's where I would start. But again, it depends on everyone's situation. The younger you are, the more I have to play with, I would say. Yeah.
And when I'm in that conversation, let's say I'm sitting next to you at the table, I always think about two things. Is that number one, start from where you are. Don't worry about the person next to you. Don't compare yourself to someone else. And don't take your failures to heart too much. And number two, I share some of my failure stories. The thing that I'm very open about was that after I lost my job, I was using credit cards to pay for everything. And I hit a point, I want to say it was about 2011, that I was more than $100,000 in debt, unsecured debt, credit card debt, high interest bearing debt. And when I finally woke up and realized that was the situation I was in, I felt so hopeless. I'm never going to dig out of this. I'm never going to be able to do anything about it. And so what I decided to do, it was a combination of things. Some of the stuff you've just talked about. How can I lower my expenses? Are there things that I no longer need that I can sell? Something I would never suggest to anyone, but that I did was I had equity in my home. I decided to tap a little bit of that. I stopped using credit cards. And then finally, I managed to switch over my interest-bearing debt in credit cards to 0% offers, and found that what was happening was I was getting much, much more payoff power that way than when I was paying at 19% interest and I'd send in a $500 payment and only $100 was going to offset the balance. And what wound up happening,
right, paying off the principal.
Yes. In 3 years, I paid it all off, all of it. And to this day, I have zero interest-bearing debt. My credit rating has shot through the roof. I don't have to worry about $1,000 a month goes to the credit card company. And good for me, but that story has a lot more power when I can share it with people who feel hopeless or feel backed up to the wall, because it's very much, if I can do it, you can do it. Believe me, you can do it. I didn't think there was any way that I can do it. And it's one of the reasons I enjoy doing what we do, is I want to be a force for good. I want to inspire people. And I hear that in what you're sharing as well. I'm wondering if along those lines, you can maybe drill down just a little bit into some of the things that you have done with your finances that you think have made a big difference. You mentioned investing as one. That's really powerful. Everybody should be investing their money. What are some other things that you've done that you know have made a difference in your financial life?
Oh man. So being married to a CPA, you live on a tight budget. To say he's frugal, it would be an understatement. I've lived through winters where he didn't want to turn on the heat because he wanted to save money. He's a funny character. Things I feel like that had really good impact was, one, marrying a CPA. That helps. He's the one that really got me to understand the power of credit cards and how to maximize them. So I remember I would go to the store with my newborn baby in like the baby carrier with a cart full of with groceries, and I would swipe the credit card, and he gets alerted every time I swipe a credit card. And so he would text me, please cancel and use the other credit card. It's 5% cash back this quarter. And, I would roll my eyes, be annoyed, but ask the cash register, I'm so sorry, can you cancel that and redo everything and use this new credit card? So little things like that has grown to a lot more. He's taught me initially in the beginning to, on how to travel using my points. Little things like that. I felt like it ended up being a fun game. And now it became a fun game and it became a habit to try to basically outsmart the credit card system and make money from them, by going on free trips. I mean, they're not free. You're lending money to the bank basically every time you swipe. But just maximizing the return, I would say it became a fun thing. But other things we've done that I feel like were really helpful was when the interest rate for homes went down to about 2%, 2.25%, we decided to refinance. Initially, when we purchased our house, we were at almost 5%. So we refinanced, and I wouldn't recommend this, but we also switched our 30-year mortgage to a 15-year mortgage. So we have a lot more in terms of monthly payment. But we wanted to do this because by the time we're 50, we would have no debt, no mortgage debt will be done. And by the time we're 50, our kids will start going to college. And so we don't know how much we could put in our 529 plan right now, but then we do know that if something happens, if our kids need us, whether they want to go to college or not, or if there's a need to have extra disposable income, we'll have that when we turn 50. Other things that we've done before the pandemic was we got solar panels. They were, I think, like $28,000, but then there was federal credit for about $16,000. So we took advantage of that and we got solar panels. And obviously we have an electric car now. And everyone right now is suffering from gas prices going up. But it hasn't affected us because we decided to invest earlier, go green. But those are some practical ways that we've invested in our finances and our future other than investing in stocks. So we do stocks also. We do, we put about 15% of our income into our retirement. We are a single car family for now. We try to avoid, but I have no desire to keep up with the Joneses. I don't need the nicer car. I don't need the bigger house. Little things like that.
They all add up. And I've got to tell you right now, when we get off mic, I need some of these tips. They are really, really incredible. I love the idea too of gamification. You alluded to that briefly. I have a very close friend in the financial world, John Finley. He works with a company called Lemonade LXP. Big shout out to John here. And one of the things I've learned from him is that you can turn this into a game. So one of the things I've done, for example, gas prices being high, is I've learned to coast with my car. I'm surprised how much I'm putting my foot on the gas when I could coast. And my mileage has gone up about 30%, which means that is offsetting gas prices. I ride my bike. Everyone should ride their bike if they can. It's great exercise. And there's so many other things that I gamify and that I try to make it fun, because finance is intimidating, right? It can be fun. And to try to solve these riddles and these problems, it's a fantastic thing. I love looking at how much I've saved, and then I have freedom to make decisions. And I should stress because just as you talked about your husband, I want to single out my wife as being a very powerful force in all of this. Whereas I can be a bit of a free spender, she is very practical and very wise. And she will be the first one to ask the question about, do we really need this? Or can we do this another way? Or how can we get this cheaper? And it's a wonderful balance. Without her, I don't think there was any way I would have been able to dig out of the debt. I say I because I created it. And I don't know that our prospects would be as bright as they are we're just about out of time. So one closing thought I would love to get from you, and it's a bit of an odd question, so I apologize in advance if it sounds funny, but I would invite you to take a look a year or 2 years into the future, and your podcast is doing great and it's achieved everything that you have dreamed of and it's helping people. What do you think that might look like? What kinds of things is Money She Wrote doing to make a difference?
Oh gosh. What is Money She doing? What is Money She Wrote doing to make a difference? Well, let me say this. So people have moments in life that change the trajectory of their life, right? Whether it's their mindset or just a whole different path, right? I want people to get out of this. Well, two things happened to me that changed the course of my life. One, there were many more, but these are just more, I don't want to say recent. They were a little bit more recent, and they were more powerful. One, when I was in my mid-20s, I was mugged. I mean, it was okay. It was okay. Like, no, I was not harmed, but then I just remember that I still can't forget the moment, like what happened. It was like a group of guys, they look like high school kids, obviously bigger than me. They took my bag and my wallet and obviously everything that was inside. I mean, I'm a New Yorker, so this is a rite of passage. Nothing that's shocking, you know. But what I took away from that is, you could lose anything. Like you could, your stocks, your cryptocurrency, they could be hacked. You could lose everything, you know? Look at what happened to Luna. So yeah, one lesson I've always learned was that it could always be taken away from me. So don't be attached to stuff. Two, more recently, one of my closest friends, was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And this is when Elliot was just born, and she had a daughter that was just born. They were literally 10 days apart. And so she found out she had cancer a couple months after. And to see someone fall to their knees, I feel like is a life-changing moment. And you realize that health is really important. And again, things could be taken from you, even your own life at any given moment. And so this is why, although terrifying, I am doing this podcast. I am not very experienced in speaking. I am not a public speaker at all. I am very uncomfortable. I feel like I don't have much to bring to the table, but I know the people I interview will. So what I want from this podcast and what I want for people or listeners to get out of it is that even though you're terrified, even though it's very uncomfortable, you need to just do what you're passionate about. And for me, it's learning. I am a very, very curious person. I'm not talkative by nature. I'm not talkative. I'm not loquacious at all, but I do ask people a lot of questions because I just want to learn from them. I might even come off as nosy because I ask such personal questions, you know, but I'm not trying to be nosy. It's not for gossip. I just want to learn. I just want to understand how you came up with that or why you took that step. Like, I just want to understand, because if that's the right way, like that's what I want to do too, you know, or that's what I want to teach my kids. So yeah. So what I want to take away from this podcast and what I want the listeners to take away is that from a year from now, I hope you do terrifying things because that's the only way you're going to grow. And that's the only way. Taking chances and doing it is the only way you're going to change anything. Like, I will not change. I can't change unless I actually do it. So the more I speak, even though I'm uncomfortable and terrified of it, the better I'm going to get. And the more I ask questions, the more answers I'm going to get. And I'm going to expand my mind and my brain, and I'm going to be such a better person from it. Not just financially. Again, like I said, being financially well off is a byproduct of very smart choices, you know? And just, I just want everyone to grow too. Like, we're on this journey together of being better people, being better parents, and financially benefiting from learning, which is, it's just a bonus. You know, that's just a bonus. That's the best part. It's not about the money. The money will come if you just do this journey of growth and being uncomfortable.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think I've said wow about 10 times in this podcast.
But just to go back, my friend is now cancer free, and we went through it together. But she is cancer free. Just want to say that.
Yeah. The bonding, the community that you just expressed reminds me that no matter what it is in life, and financially especially, we do not walk alone. And I am so impressed that you brought up the nature of your friend's illness and what happened to you, because that is so true. Financially, things can be taken away from us in a moment. And the key for all of us is to have that detachment from material things, from appetites. Mm-hmm. Those are the same things that I think get a lot of people in financial trouble. And to be able to say, I want to be connected to people the way you were connected to your friend who survived cancer. I want to learn. I want to be curious. You mentioned terrified. I'm a word guy, right? So the flip side of terrified is terrific. And when I started my journey, it was 2009. I was at the Chicago Tribune. I was an arts guy. I was an arts writer. And my editor came up to me and said, we want you to do a weekly syndicated column on personal finance. And my reaction was, you got to be kidding. You picked the exact wrong person. I know nothing about this. And what my editor said, oh, that's great, because you'll learn and you'll teach people as you go. And I remember she walked away from my desk and I got so anxious. I said, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this. I don't know what I'm doing. They haven't even seen my checkbook. It's a disgrace. And every step of the way, I learned something and I learned something. Homer Biggert, who was one of the greatest foreign correspondents who ever lived, he used to say, talk slowly and ask people to explain things to you. And what he found was that a lot of people are happy to explain things. They like to be experts. They pass things along. So my path over 10 years is going from knowing nothing and making mistakes and writing about things that turned out to be wrong and making predictions that were wrong, to still acknowledging that I can make mistakes, but actually having a place in this world where I'm regarded as somewhat of an expert and people seek me out. I'm writing for the Wall Street Journal's buy side right now. I spent 5 years writing for U.S. News and World Report about investments. I will tell you, Eugen, I knew absolutely zero about any of the things I've written about when I go back to 2009. I liked to go to concerts and watch cool bands. That's what I did. And so in relating your story, I'm going to make my own prediction about what will happen a year or two from now, is that people are going to look up to you. They're going to look up to your humility. They are going to look up to your desire to learn. They are going to look up to your vulnerability. And they are going to look up to the really valuable things that you're going to pass along. I feel confident in that prediction because you're doing it today and you've done it over the past couple of years. You have walked your talk. Eugen, thank you so much for sharing this podcast episode with me today. I feel privileged.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Eugen Lee is the social media manager at moneycrashers.com, and she is the host of a brand new, incredibly special podcast, Money She Wrote. You can look for Eugen on LinkedIn. That's a wrap.
Thank you